Welcome to the first episode of Season 4 of the Caucus Corner. Each week, we bring legislators and New Yorkers together to discuss some of the most pressing issues from the perspective of people of color. I am your host, Assemblywoman Micaela Salach, Chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Our theme for this year's legislative session is agency and action, a sentiment that expresses the importance of governing our state in a swift but practical fashion, especially during a time where we are facing hostile and combative federal leadership. Despite this hostility, it is our duty as legislators to make sure that we continue to defend the rights of all New Yorkers, whether it's making housing more affordable for people across the state, protecting immigrant families from unjust deportation, or taking a stand against child poverty. Action must be taken, and it must be taken at the state level. This is why members of the Executive Board and I are here to highlight our key priorities for the 2025 state budget. Our framework, which has been dubbed the People's Budget, calls on the state to prioritize an equitable path forward for communities of color that is anchored in generational solutions. This framework aims to break down racial and social economic barriers that have been undermining these marginal communities for decades. So before we start breaking down some of the caucus priorities, I want each of the members on our wonderful podcast to introduce themselves and tell our listeners what their position is on the executive board. So we're going to start off with our second vice chair, Senator Fernandez.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I'm Senator Natalia Fernandez, representing District 34, covering the East Bronx and Southeast Westchester. That's the communities of Throgs Neck, Parkchester, Castle Hill, Country Club, City Island, and New Rochelle and Pelham in Westchester. I am the second vice chair of our wonderful caucus and also the subcommittee chair of environmental conservation. So excited for the conversation today.
Is JGR in the house?
JGR is in the house. Hi, everyone. I am Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, better known as JGR. I proudly represent parts of Western Queens, the neighborhoods of Jackson Heights, East Elmhurst, Corona, Woodside, and Astoria. And I am proud to be the secretary of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus.
And then we have another friend from Queens.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Assemblymember Steve Raga. I represent District 30 in Queens. Those are the neighborhoods of Woodside, Maspeth, Elmhurst, and pieces of Jackson Heights and East Elmhurst. Happy to join and happy this year to serve as chaplain on the executive board and looking forward to continuing working with everybody and looking forward to the podcast.
I thank each and every member of the executive board for really investing into the caucus and pushing forth the initiative that uplifts our communities. And one priority I think that's super important to many members of the caucus is tackling food insecurity. It's a critical issue that we face in New York and with low-income households bearing the brunt of it. So increasing SNAP and helping folks across the state, whether from Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, all the way downstate to Long Island, it's important that we have a commitment to food insecurity or a commitment to food security as a basic human right. So I'm going to kick it off to Jessica Gonzalez Rojas to kind of talk about what we've been doing and what our caucus priority is around food.
Thank you, Chair. I am so proud to work with the caucus to really look at the solutions to address poverty and food insecurity in New York State. You know, some of the issues we've been fighting for is to make sure that every single person in our state can have access to healthy, nutritious food. And we know communities of color are often disproportionately impacted by food insecurity. One thing that we've been fighting for years together, and we're so proud that has been included in the executive budget, is universal school meals. So I want to thank the chair and all the members of the caucus for being such a champion on that. You cannot teach a hungry child. So we know how important it is to make sure that every child across the state has access to a healthy breakfast and healthy lunch. However, there are other wonderful and important tools in the toolbox of addressing hunger in the state. The SNAP program, sometimes known as food stamps, is one of them. And there's a couple of things that we need to make sure we're improving the program in order to make it more accessible in this moment where inflation is incredibly high and access to food is becoming more and more difficult. So I want to raise two issues, actually three issues quickly, but one of them is looking at the minimum benefit. Right now, the minimum benefit is $23 per month. And $23 can barely get us 2 dozen eggs at this point. Forget about food for the month. And this often impacts older adults on a fixed income. So we have a bill that the caucus supports that will increase the minimum benefit to $100 a month to make sure that we're adequately addressing the rising cost of food and that folks can make sure they're filling their baskets with nutritious food whenever they go shopping with SNAP. The other thing is increasing eligibility and expanding eligibility. We know we have many New Yorkers in the state who do not have immigration status, but are still contributing members of society and are still dealing with food insecurity issues. And then the last thing I want to raise is SNAP skimming. SNAP skimming is a really, really disheartening issue because people who have SNAP might go to the grocery store, save up their money, have maybe $100 or $200 that they're spending, and then they get to the checkout and it's been stolen by some, criminals in California or Chicago, and there's zero money on their card. We have legislation that will address the actual card to make it chip encrypted to protect it, but also create a fund to allow for New York State to reimburse victims of skimming. The federal government is currently required to do so. They ended their program in December of 2024. With this administration, we don't see it happening. So we need to do what we can in New York to make sure that our vulnerable New Yorkers have access to their SNAP dollars without threat of skimming. So I'll stop there, but it's a lot to do. And I'm really, really proud to work with the caucus on these really critical issues to address food insecurity in New York.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. Really, food is such an important aspect. And so I always appreciate working with members of the caucus because we've learned in politics, you can't be a jack of all trades or a jacqueline of all trades, but you could really focus on issues and get things done, especially in state government. Steve, Assemblyman Raga, are you working on anything?
Yeah, for sure, and it's great that most of the folks here and all the folks on today's podcast, we're all kind of like have the same priority issues, and all New Yorkers are going through many similar things. So it's great to hear from everybody else on their priorities. But of course, in our district, and I'm neighboring JGR, so a lot of things she's mentioning, our constituents are facing similar things, especially with the food insecurity. But in our part of Queens, there's a few things that are top of mind, and of course housing and both tenants and what homeowners are going through. And in our part of the city, our corner of the city, and in District 30, we have from top to bottom, left to right, the flooding and the environmental factors that are impacting homes from East Elmhurst to Middle Village, Maspeth. Every part of the constituency is every time there's an inch of rain, our office are flooded by calls from constituents. So it's so important to us to at least for me, to prioritize our rainy day fund, so that while the executive can make immediate investments to the state's social infrastructure, we need to promote more positive outcomes for all New Yorkers, not just in Queens or downstate, but everywhere. And setting aside a rainy day fund and prep for potential issues for or a fiscal downturn. I'm so proud that the caucus is prioritizing this. And it's something that a lot of us is going to help a lot of our constituents. Another thing that we have that we're prioritizing is at least just. I only have one. I just got one Mitchell llama in my district, but I mean, we got to fight for all of them. And I think that Mitchell llamas, of course, it's so important to have that that option of affordable housing for middle-class families in across New York. And so establishing a dedicated repair fund for Mitchell-Lama complexes, it's so important. This initiative is going to address a lot of hazardous conditions that are popping up, fund necessary for renovations, and just keep making sure that these properties are still affordable for New Yorkers, for seniors, for lower to middle income families that are looking to start or get their first home. So those are things that I think that I hear every day when I'm going to visiting schools or just walking down Roosevelt Avenue. Folks are concerned, and it's great that I could go back to them and say, well, actually, our caucus is also prioritizing this in the budget. So we're looking out for you in Albany, and we're going to continue to do so. So I'm happy to work with folks on the board and everybody else to make sure this is realized in this year.
Thank you, Assembly Member. You really, we appreciate your insight and your drive in making sure that New York is represented. And so, Senator Fernandez, I know that you're working on so many great initiatives, and I appreciate it because you're really talking about, the impacts of some communities that are not able to really uplift themselves. So, please let's hear from you. What's going on?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing a lot of work and giving as much, and proper focus and attention to the committee I chair, substance use disorder and alcoholism. And, that alone is a heavy topic. We know how much our communities, our families, our neighbors suffer with the struggles of addiction. So making sure that our state is doing everything possible has been my priority to, guide them to care, to make sure that they can get the support that's needed for long-term care, long-term recovery, and overall destigmatizing the conversation, letting it be known that this is something we should not be afraid to talk about. We should not be afraid to, give attention to, and to continue to give funding in the areas that need more support. So in particular with the budget, I'm proud to push our people's budget. Proud to push a few initiatives that I've started since becoming chair, and that is to create a drug checking program. So right now in select areas of the state in crisis drop-in centers, there is a drug checking machine that once a week these facilities can get for the day. So anybody that's coming in, and these crisis centers have wraparound services in hygiene, making sure people can shower, can clean their clothes, can clean their wounds, get medical care, as well as counseling, meditative therapy, so many things. So this machine is there, so when people are coming in to even get clean supplies, clean needles through needle exchange programs, they can check to see what's in their supply that they've gotten from the street or wherever have you. And this is important because right now with fentanyl on the rise, every supply that's out there in the streets is contaminated with fentanyl. Just about every testing that's been done in these machines, we're finding fentanyl. So it's important to know if someone is going to make that choice then to use it, after knowing what is in the supply, that they have full awareness of the support that is there. So my bill would allow all crisis centers in the state to have this machine in their facility at all times. This would help us know, what is happening where the contaminated supply is coming from, especially also with the rise of xylazine and metonidine. This is animal tranquilizers, rhino tranquilizers that's getting mixed into, people's, supply of like cocaine that they're going to find. So this is important because, again, it's notifying the person that is using of what's in there, and they can make the best educated choice for themselves, either to choose to use it, to not use it, or anything positive. So really looking forward to seeing that go through. And we made some strides in the last 2 years in getting it through the Senate finally last year. It passed on the floor. We've built up support through the Department of Health. They've become very supportive in helping us figure out the way this can happen and funding it. And in addition to making the stewardship fund permanent, we have a name for it. I know a lot of our initiatives are helpful with the name. So this one is called OPRA. It's the Overdose Prevention Response Act, and that is making the stewardship fund permanent. So the difference between the settlement funds and the stewardship funds, the settlement funds is the dollars that we're getting from the court cases that our Attorney General, Tish James, had done with all these opioid suppliers. And every year we get a certain amount of millions of dollars based on, when the payouts are coming through. So like in our budget this year, the number is less in settlement funds because that's just what is coming to us in this year. The stewardship funds is a tax on the opioid manufacturers, and there is a sunset. So knowing that the funds will dwindle at some point in the future, they will dry out, we need to make sure that we're still with a source of funding to help the many providers and organizations and clinics that are doing important care in detox and rehabilitation, and more importantly, recovery support. One big difference in my Oprah bill is that it's going to add a 20% revenue stream to recovery programs and have them covered by OASIS. So right now, recovery programs are not administering any medicines such as buprenorphine or methadone, but these are support communities, clubhouses, organizations that have peer support advocates. I do have another bill too that would expand the ability to hire peer support advocates, get them reimbursed by Medicaid dollars, and even get them better access into places like our correctional facilities, because right now any certified counselor that might have a record from their time when they were with their substance use disorder, they can't even enter the facilities to then talk to inmates to help them in their struggle. So we're really trying to remove barriers that exist and creating real support systems for the programs that exist and also the individuals that are utilizing them, because we need to keep doing the most possible. It's been seen that overdoses did go down, which is a great thing, but we still see that numbers are high within Black and Brown communities. So the outreach needs to continue to be there tenfold, and recovery services are a great program or service that not only helps somebody who has entered their path to recovery and wants to stay long term, but also pulling in those to make that first choice to take the step into a new life. So happy for the progress made and grateful for the support of the caucus and many of my colleagues. We just need to see it come to the finish line and really get the state in a place that is supporting these services forever.
And it's so important because when these crises impact our communities, we as a caucus champion treatment and support and not incarceration. So, Senator, I really appreciate your laser focus on this. And I'm so thankful that you're part of the executive board and a part of the greater caucus fighting for this.
Thank you so much. And yeah, the caucus has been great. And I also just wanted to plug transparency. I know there's been talk about the settlement funds and where they're going and how there's not the same transparency mechanism that OASIS has to do versus the counties that get these funds. So we're looking at legislation to make sure that wherever these dollars are going, we know where they're going and how they're being used.
Thank you, Senator. Well, it's exciting to hear about our e-board's priorities and, our budget document. We can, discuss and talk about all of the great initiatives that we're pushing. But I feel that right now in our communities, one of the top priorities is making sure that our folks have access to resources, especially our immigrant communities. New York is a place where there are a lot of foreign-born individuals. And irrespective of their status, we are feeling a fear in our community, right? Right, Assemblymember Senator? Have you heard about the fear going on with ICE raids?
There is absolutely a fear. Many community leaders have been asking, what can we do? And the first thing that many of us, jump to do is just to make sure people know their basic rights. So getting information from our Attorney General's office to all these organizations so they can spread the word has been, I think, our top priority. But of course, everybody's like, what more can we do? And there is, an effect to this fear. We just heard recently that we are seeing low attendance rates in our schools because children and families, their parents, are afraid to send their children to go pick up their children. So it's constantly, growing and changing with the news as to what is allowable from or what is allowed by ICE coming into these facilities. But we need to prepare our communities with assistance when that time comes, if that time comes for them. And that is legal services, because right now it's looking like they are just scanning to see who might be an immigrant. And I think I even saw a news report somewhere that a Puerto Rican man was taken, and he's like, "I'm a U.S. citizen. Like, what are you doing?" So, like, when you get into that moment, who knows how long the legal system will try you, will try to figure out what they're trying to figure out. But we know that our communities will need legal support if it gets to that point that it's just, the wrong person, wrong efforts, leave me alone. And we want to make sure they have that support. So extra funding to legal services and the access to representation is something that we're looking at as a caucus and supporting, because that really is, I think, the last defense for many when they get into that, the beginning of the legal situation after being approached by ICE.
Yeah. And despite what you hear from certain elected officials, being an immigrant is not a crime in this country, in a sense that we should be creating a legal process. But until the federal government, gets their act together, here in New York State, we got to fight. And so, Senator, you're right. That $100 million in funding for access to representation, which would guarantee counsel for immigrants facing deportation, would really help, stabilize our state. And as you know, our state, an immigrant state, many of these contribute, whether it's, in hospitality, healthcare, so many different industries. You see folks looking for support and help and legal guidance. So, we're excited in the caucus to push for a Know Your Rights forum very soon, and we're going to go beyond legislation to really help them in our communities. And so, it's an ongoing conversation that we're having. Let's talk about another topic, which I think is very important in the caucus, and that's access to education. Whether you're in New York City or upstate, education is the key. And so I know in the caucus, we are looking to update the foundation aid formula to reflect the actual cost of providing students with a sound and basic education. And this includes adding weights for students with disabilities, English language learners, and those who are homeless or in foster care. With that, we also want to ensure that we have support for solutions, not suspension, which focuses on training educators to take a non-punitive approach when disciplining their students. And that would help foster a safer and more supportive environment while we are reducing our reliance on suspension. And so when we are talking about this implementation, it's important that we are creating and encouraging a more inclusive environment for our students, especially our students of color, because always we hear about this school to prison pipeline where kids are disciplined and suspended, especially right now when we talk about the landscape in New York State. There are kindergarteners, let me go on beyond that. There are pre-K students, kindergarten, first graders to third graders who are getting suspended and missing a large portion of their education. And it's not because they are bad. It's because they may have behavioral issues, they may have special needs, or they may be going through something at home and they're, exerting this behavior as a cry of help because they are not adults. They can't use their words or don't have the ability to use their words to tell themselves that, or to tell their adults that they are going through something tumultuous. And so it's interesting how we are moving in this landscape when it comes to education.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should always focus, especially these times, focus on supporting our education system and our students from our youngest students to our oldest students, and making sure that our budget reflected equitable distribution of that, whether foundation aid or any other support is such a priority. And regarding solutions, not suspension, I mean, it's a great point you mentioned. If the students are having trouble at home and they're just that's how they're acting in school because of that, suspending them might only make it worse, and make the problem at home worse, make their situation at school worse. So there really has to be a better way that's non-punitive to making sure our students are disciplined, but also in a way that is safe and is supportive, not just for themselves, but for the entirety of the school and also their families at home. So hopefully this is something that we could get this done soon. Our students really need it. You could see them when they come to Albany and they're meeting with us and having their rally. They know that from firsthand or with their friends that this is an issue, and looking forward to working with our colleagues to make sure this happens soon.
I agree. Our schools are in so much need of support. Um, the foundation aid alone, the governor's budget was concerning a little bit because it looks like there might be, less foundation aid. And with the growth and progress that we've made over the last few terms and sessions with that money, like, don't take it away from us. Like, look what we've been able to do with it. So the pressure is on to make sure that, New York City, because I think that's who's seeing the most reduction in foundation aid, does not see that cut or loss, and that we continue creating a school system that is supportive in the ways that it needs to be. And that includes solutions, not suspensions, because still we see the punishments being incredibly harsh that in results, will keep the child behind. So that shouldn't be what a school aims to do in any way, in my opinion. But, you know, we I'm faithful in this bill moving forward and continuing to remain a topic of discussion in the forefront when it comes to, changing how our schools can be more helpful.
I don't think Senator Robert Jackson will allow us to decrease any foundation aid whatsoever.
He will not. He's ready to march again.
He's ready to march again. So, and he's also the sponsor of the solution, not suspension bill in the Senate. So really, there's a advocacy that the caucus is going to be at the forefront of to ensure that we are fully funding our schools, because we cannot step back. We had spent too many years with the lack of sustainable funding. So this is important to us. That wraps up this episode of the Caucus Corner. Thank you for tuning in as we continue the conversations on the policies and issues that impact our communities. Stay tuned with the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus by following us on social media and visiting our website for updates on our legislative work and upcoming events. If you found today's discussion valuable, be sure to share this episode and subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, let's keep pushing for progress and equity for all New Yorkers. Thank you for listening.